Yeah, thank you, Professor Oscar Brenifier and other friends who have joined us. Thank you, Monological, for asking me to say a few words. Um, in fact, I don't know how to begin, but uh, in continuation with the international conference that we have organized last month, we wanted to have a series of workshops on philosophical counseling because one of the concerns that we had is we had an academic discourse on philosophical counseling to which we have exposed our Indian enthusiasts about philosophical counseling. But academic discourse itself is insufficient because we are talking about philosophical practice. So talking about it and doing it are two different things, and we all know that. So that keeping that in our mind, we thought we should have series of workshops, and I'm greatly indebted to Professor Oscar. When we approached him, in fact, in the beginning itself, he has given dates saying that I'm available on these dates, and uh, uh, I would be happy to have a workshop for the Indian audience. So that is how our interaction began, and subsequently we couldn't do it immediately after the conference because of various other administrative hiccups that we had to face. But then we thought we should go ahead, and it is all because of the kind of support that we have got from Oscar, that we are able to organize this first workshop on philosophical counseling from Oscar in India. And I strongly believe that we should go further and do many more such kind of workshops so that the Indian audience who are not really exposed to philosophical counseling's wider kind of connotations and also wider ways of doing it. We talk about methodologies and we talk about various kinds of practices, but we are supposed to get exposed to these practices and methodologies. Only then we would be able to understand them and use them according to our needs. I know there are many friends who have joined us today who have been practicing philosophical counseling. So I'm not saying that we don't know philosophical practice at all, philosophical counseling at all. We know we are doing it in our own way. We have to be creative in using it and inventing our own methodologies and ways of doing. But at the same time, it is also required that we should get exposed to the established ways of it is being done elsewhere in the world. And that is the kind of thought we had in organizing this workshop. And friends, Oscar Brenifier, I don't have to introduce him because he was also there in the conference and he offered 1 hour workshop there. And I'm sure many of you might have joined and had the benefit of enjoying his way of doing philosophical counseling, which is really mesmerizing kind of one, because friends, as philosophy students and philosophical practitioners and specifically philosophical counselors, it is also required that we should understand we also require philosophical counseling many times. It is not that if you are a counselor, you don't require counseling at all. So counselors also would definitely require counseling. And I attended one of the sessions with Oscar's student, Anna. Oh, that was really like it is an eye opener for me because uh, I thought, yeah, I'm doing well. But when she stopped me at many times and asked me to reflect on certain things, I thought, oh, did I say this? Do I really think this way? So it's like it's a big eye opener to me attending that workshop. So that's why I felt that's why I felt that uh, all of you also should get the benefit of attending Oscar Brenifier's workshop and enjoy it. And he has been an established philosophical practitioner, and he has been working in France, and also is presently probably in Russia, I believe. That's that triggers something else in the mind. But anyway, let me not get into that war note here. He's uh, his way of like whenever we do philosophical practice, it is also required that we practice it more and more so that we can refine our skills. And it is also required, as some of us think, you have to minimize the theorization. If you go on theorizing it too much, then probably you would be missing the essence of practicing it. So while listening to Oscar's some of the video conversations and workshops, I felt that he gives more stress on the practice than and less on theorization. So that's what I felt one of the characteristic uh, uh, feature of Oscar's way of doing philosophical counseling, and we would definitely find a very interesting way of observation and demonstration that happens in the process. And I request those who are, I know that there are some students who are doing philosophical counseling in Department of Philosophy at Delhi University who have joined us today. Friends, you take down notes and see how this process is going on, and also see how you relate yourself to, and also it's not just relating yourself, it is also relating your knowledge to what is happening here, in the way of practicing philosophy. This is what you have to get linked with, so that your knowledge and the way of being, a way of doing it, way of using the knowledge are very important, and this is what would definitely come out in the best possible way. And I think one of the very important things that Oscar Brenifier focuses is philosophical competencies. I was reading some of his works, so I found that his focus on philosophical competencies like argumentation, conceptualization, interpretation, and problematization, or he has developed interesting exercises with regard to each one of these philosophical competencies, and we would, I'm sure we would get a wonderful perspective of his these features that he stresses in the course of his philosophical counseling. So I welcome Oscar for coming forward to this workshop. I welcome him and I invite him to this workshop. I also welcome all the participants, other participants who have joined us today. I'm sure we will witness one of the very interesting ways of doing philosophical counseling as developed by Oscar Brenifier today. So we're all looking forward to this exciting session. Yeah, welcome to all of you. Over to you, Monological.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to introduce Professor Oscar Brenifier. Professor Oscar Brenifier is one of the main promoters of practice of Socratic dialogue on an international level. For many years in France, as well as in the rest of the world, he has been working on the concept of philosophical practice, both from a theoretical as well as a practical viewpoint. He is one of the promoters of the projects like Philosophy in the City, organizing philosophy workshops for children, and also working as a philosophical consultant. These are some of the areas he's working, but there are many more. He has published about 50 books in this domain, which has been translated over 30 languages. He founded the Institute of Philosophical Practice to train philosophical practitioners and organize philosophy workshops in various places. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. Your workshops, I think we are already a fan from you, for you. I mean, we're a fan of you. Even I'm stumbling because of that reason, because we were very excited to hear you in the conference. And we have been getting so many requests that we want to hear you again. Thank you so much for doing this. The stage is yours.
Okay. All right. So I guess I have to thank you too then, because, you know, in my long career, because now officially I'm retired, even though I think I'll never retire, but anyhow, I have worked in many countries, maybe about 50 countries, and I never had a chance to do some work in India. So I'm trying to compensate now, thanks to the virtual world, you know. So I'm very happy to be able to do this with the Indian, even though some are here are guests like me, not Indian. But yeah, to do in Indian context, especially because India has as well a long philosophical tradition. Yeah. So it's always, by the way, one thing, and people that know different culture are aware of this. I think it's always very interesting to work in different cultural contexts because it enlightens us about the human being as a whole, as a functioning. And I work a lot with Chinese students. I was telling them, they asked me, but when you say something about China, is it only Chinese people who are like this? I say, well, let me put it this way. We're all Chinese, but the Chinese are more Chinese than the others. But in other words, when I work in China, I will realize certain features of humanity which might be more striking in China, but it still enlightens us about the human being as a whole. A bit like when you work with someone, of course, someone has his own way of being, his own personality, certain types of thought patterns. But even though the person is singular, it enlightens you about the functioning of the human being as a whole. Yeah. So for me, the fact of working in a different cultural context has been very enlightening and helpful to develop different aspect of the practice. Yeah. Yes. And it's true that in fact, when I do a consultation with someone, very often the understanding or the knowledge of the culture, of the background is quite, I'm not a structuralist, but still I think the structuralist had a certain adequate concept, thinking how much the structure started with language itself can determine a lot the way that people think, and what means something in a given context might be means something else or signify something else in different contexts. Yeah. So anyway, so now you see I'm starting by betraying my own trade because I'm starting to lecture. So I'm going to start giving some background thoughts. First of all, because maybe not everybody is familiar, so I'll give a little introduction. But at any point, if somebody wants to interrupt me, to ask a question, to have an objection, to something is not clear, do not hesitate, even though I will first develop some theoretical ideas. It can still be a certain dialogue, but later on it will be more dialogical type of exchanges, but it will come naturally, I think, as we go along. So don't hesitate. You want to say something, either you raise your hand or activate the virtual hand. And Madhulika, maybe you can help me because I don't always notice virtual hands. I have, for some reason, I don't see them. If you see one, just let me know, okay?
Sure, sir, sure.
Put out the little yellow hand, little virtual yellow hand. Okay, yes. So first, maybe I give some background, a little bit philosophical or background to this, to what we are. Now, I say we because, of course, I'm not the only one to do philosophical practice. Not at some points, I will speak more for myself or the way we work in our school, yeah, and it might differ or be common to what other people are trying to do, but I still think there is a common grounds in philosophical practice, yeah. So the first thing I'd like to do to bit clarify things, and for me that was a bit the triggering aspect historically in my career, let's put it this way, is a bit the one who is the father figure, a historical father figure of philosophical practice, I think, which is Socrates. And I think this is generally recognized by most people involved in the practice, that Socrates represents a bit the father figure, a bit like maybe Freud represents a father figure for psychologists, even though psychology often has went away, but it still represents sort of a key figure. And I would like to clarify, to oppose the figure of Socrates to the other one who I think has become the major figure for philosophy, let's call it academic philosophy or traditional philosophical work, which is more Aristotle, yeah? And here to see the difference between Aristotle and Socrates, I think this gives us insight. Now, of course, you can make connections, make links, see what might be common to them. After all, indirectly, Aristotle is a student, since he was a student of Plato, who was a student of Socrates. But still, there's a major turn that took place between Socrates and Aristotle. And the main thing probably is that Aristotle has developed a strong theory with a lot of defining categories, defining knowledge, defining theories, using a lot as well the theories that were existing before him. So constructing, I mean, maybe a system would not be the really adequate word, but still some kind of, let's call it system, a reference, which was in fact the reference for centuries in Western philosophy. So it's more monological. It's more like what philosophers often tend to do. They study, they theorize, they write books, and then people read that. Now again, I don't want to say it has no interest. After all, I had to study, and if I did, I think I found some interest. Now, what's the main difference with Socrates is that it's, first of all, is dialogical. Yeah, the thinking takes place through dialogue. You need the other one, and it's this exchange, this friction, even this conflictual dimension that can be, because Socrates had a lot of conflicts, primarily with the philosophers of his time, the sophists. The sophists were monological. The sophists were the ones who had a lot of knowledge. They knew everything about everything. You could still pretend that at the time. It's more difficult now. And they knew all what today would be called sciences. And people would send if you had money, you would send your children to learn with these sophists. They were knowledgeable people. Yeah. And Socrates then therefore introduced the idea that thinking takes place through dialogue. You need dialogue. And in a way, the idea that truth happens through the other person. Now, already the idea of truth is not so much the idea of an established discourse, an established theory, but truth is like some in-betweenness, something unseizable. In fact, we find this in Plato when he says there is vulgar opinion, what people say. There is expert opinion, the knowledge of people who are educated people, smart people. And then there's truth, but truth is a bit unseizable. It's like it's a transcending feature which you can never pretend to attain. Right? It's just something that a permanent tension that occurs. And it occurs precisely through the exchange between different people. Yeah. So dialogue takes place primarily through questioning, because that's how the thinking evolves. Because you don't, and that's a point on which Plato insists that evidence, and we'll see later on in history that philosophers will criticize that, but evidence is the enemy of thinking. When something is evident, you stop thinking. You acquired it, it's knowledge, it's for sure. Actually, you see this in Aristotle. Periodically, he will start thinking, we say, it is known that, we agree that, and then he'll give you some definition, some idea. If ever you find this in Plato, you have to be suspicious, although the later Plato starts already to be more, let's say, theoretical. But the idea that any idea is just a basis for starting a thinking process. It's never the end of the thinking process. And that's why even the Plato dialogue never have a real end. They never really have a real ending. It's always open-ended, as just the beginning of a thinking process. So the first thing is dialogical. I think that's the main difference. And what's funny is that when you meet philosophers from academic world, they will always recognize that Socrates is a father figure. But what struck me when I was young, I discovered Socrates and I fell in love with Socrates. I can say he's the love of my life, is that they don't apply it, right? They apply certain aspects, for example, the idea to conceptualize. What's the definition of this? But the idea of making questioning, permanent questioning, as the essence of what thinking is, this has been given up. And that's what struck me very young. I discovered Socrates with his permanent questioning, and I say, that's what I want to do. That's what is interesting. And as much as I appreciate Immanuel Kant, you mainly see definition, distinction, analysis, questioning. Of course, probably he asks himself question as well. But the idea is presented as a body of knowledge, and not so much as a live questioning. So the second feature, then beside dialogue, is the idea of a permanent questioning, that the question is the essence of the philosophical dynamic. And the third aspect is the fact you can philosophize with absolutely anyone. Now, of course, this is definitely not the case in today's academic philosophy, where philosophers speak to philosophers. And in fact, when I try to organize philosophy workshops for everybody, in France, everybody has to basically study philosophy the last year of high school. It's a tradition, just 1 year, the last year of high school. So everybody has studies philosophy at some point, but in general, it has it's viewed as something hard, something difficult, something very abstract, and plus something where you get bad grades, because it's difficult. So most people say, yeah, the philosophy course made my average grade drop because it was very low. Yeah. And generally, they don't have a very good, some people, like myself, had a good memory of it, but the majority of people don't have a very good memory of philosophy. So when I say, okay, let's have a philosophical workshop, people are very hesitant, reluctant. They don't have a good memory of it, yeah? And that's the main difference with Socrates, because he was speaking with anyone. Anybody he would encounter. In fact, my students in Russia accused me of suffering from what they call CSD, compulsive Socratic disorder, and they wanted to propose to send this to the DSM in the book, all the psychological diseases. And it's true, because you look at Socrates, he cannot see anybody without questioning him about anything. The guy starts saying, I'm just going to the tribunal, and right away discussion, what is justice, you're right, yeah. So yeah, there is like some I don't know who it was, maybe Lacan or something else, accused Socrates of being like a hysterical woman, who, a woman who was in love, and so she always wants to talk to her love. But Socrates, he loves anyone to the extent he can dialogue with this person. So you could not meet one person without engaging, whoever the person is, it doesn't matter, but he would engage in a slave or a general, he would engage in philosophical dialogue, because he thinks that's for everybody. In fact, there's a famous quote of Plato saying that a life which is not examined is not worth living. Now, that's a very radical statement. And I know that all the years, I ask myself, is this true? Is this true? Because sometimes people tell me, well, like, why did you bother this poor guy? You know, he seems fine. He seems happy. He seems everything is good. Why do you go and question him and bother him? Because again, I have this disease where I try to philosophize whoever comes my way. That's why I live now in a little village in the countryside. Number of people avoid me because they think I'm a weirdo. But anyhow, but so he would question just about anyone. But so I ask myself, is it true that if you don't question yourself, there's a problem with your life? And so periodically I see these people that seem fine and they're happy and why bother them and all that. And I noticed one thing as a conclusion of years of practice, that Socrates was right. Because these people who look fine, you look at their Facebook, they're all, you know, great, family's great, and life is great, and we have holidays by the beach, and we have birthday party. You know, Facebook is good for promoting how great is our life. And I question those people, and very quickly, they either get upset, they get bothered, yeah, which means that the way that they survive psychologically is by avoiding to examine their life, examine their self, yeah. And here actually I have this thought about Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, who says, but why do people care more about their house than about their being? Yeah, which echoes a bit this preoccupation where people will spend a lot of effort, with a house and making it nice and cleaning it and ordering it and repairing it. Yeah, a lot of work, a lot of effort. But when you start examining their self, their life, their purpose, their meaning, very quickly people get destabilized, get upset, and that's what we see what happened with Socrates. But some as a joke, I say that Socrates made a mistake. He always stayed in the same place, and people finally got very upset with him, and they killed him. So I say the way I saved myself by traveling a lot. Yeah. So by the time people would get upset, I had moved. People would not, maybe symbolically some killed me because I got upset people. Yeah. But the idea, yes, that there is a fundamental necessity of human existence, which is to examine oneself, to interrogate oneself, to identify our values, what we pursue, and this is often not done. And just to continue by my bad mouthing of academic philosophers, in general, it's particularly difficult with when I don't have it so much the opportunity, but when I do this with academic philosophers and do questioning exercise, to do some consultation, they tend to react quite badly. Because there's the idea that the self is outside of the philosophical work. Yeah, I do this philosophical work, I read books, I write, but it's like outside of the self. Yeah, when the idea of philosophical practice, the Socratic idea, is that your self is not outside of the philosophical work, it should be at the center of the philosophical work. Yeah. So, for example, you'll meet people who are specialists on the Cynics or on the Stoics, but it's not about their life. It's about some knowledge they have, and maybe actually they write interesting things. I read still and listen a lot to people that do some research, but there's no relation, there's no dialectic between their life, their existence, their person, themselves as a subject, and the philosophical work that they're doing. Now, it's not always this radical. Sometimes some people make more connection, but it tends a lot to be the case. Yeah. So when we try to make this connection, or we try to make the subject as the center, as Socrates proposes it, in other words, when we philosophize, the idea is, who are you? What are you doing? What are you pursuing? What is the goal of your life? That's at the center. So that's why then knowledge, erudition, scholarship becomes secondary to the idea of looking at yourself. So then people tell me, but then what is philosophical about it? Doesn't it look like psychology, for example? What is the difference? Why do you say it's philosophical? And as Professor it's hard for me, Balaganapati has said, by the way, in India, Bala, do you first put the family name or first put the first name?
Usually we put the family name first, but this time
Okay.
I placed my family name second. So Bala is the first name.
So each time I'll have to figure out which is which. Anyhow, sorry if I make mistakes.
No problem.
Okay.
You can just call me Bala. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. But I know I work in the Arabic world, and same, they put the family name, family first name with the Chinese as well. Anyway. Yeah, so they say, what is philosophical about it? And as Bala, then it's easier, thank you, said it, we focused a lot on competencies, yeah, that what is philosophy? It's not about a knowledge, it's a particular skill. So in other words, it's not the idea of having references, having knowledge of philosophy, of the history, often it's the history of philosophy, but what skills are we using when we do philosophical work? That is the essence. So you can say it's a competence-based practice rather than knowledge, rather than knowledge. And so I won't develop all of it, but basically, what do we see in the practice already in Socrates, but then developed later on, because some philosophers are quite enlightening from that standpoint, because I love a lot Socrates, but for me, people like Hegel, for example, are very useful to precisely identify those competencies. Kant as well give interesting, but he's more analytical. But what are the basic competencies we're using? Yeah, well, of course, the idea is argumentation. How do you construct? Not argumentation in the rhetorical sense where you got to prove, but philosophical argumentation, which means you try to look for a grounding. Why do you say this? Where does this idea come from? So argumentation is very important. Problematization, and here I will use the Hegel's postulate that any idea can be problematized. There's not an absolute proposition. There's not an absolute idea. Any idea can be problematized, including the present proposition that everything be problematized. Yeah. So in a way, any truth, any fundamental truth in particular, is necessarily of a paradoxical nature. So and that's a very dialectical posture, that anything can be problematized. But I see a couple of hands up, so I'll be happy to stop my monologue and see you. Yeah, okay. So Reka Navneet, and please forgive a priori my pronunciations. Okay, so Reka Navneet, can you tell us what you want to say?
Thank you, Professor Oscar, for that.
But can I see you? Just in case you're a robot, I prefer to see you.
Yeah,
good.
Here
Okay.
I am. And very good evening, and thank you for that extensive presentation. Actually, I can call myself just a new entrant in a way to this new domain of philosophy. And ever since, and I did attend the conference, so ever since I have taken it in a very enamored way, I have been wondering that when we talk of Socratic wisdom, how do we justify that it is philosophical in the sense of being Socratic wisdom? I'm talking about philosophical counseling, because as you also pointed out, that Socratic wisdom was in contrast to sophists. And in a way, it is also in contrast to Aristotelian kind of theorization. Now, my dilemma or my query is that on the one hand, we have always understood Socrates via Plato as someone who has talked about abstract reasoning and has placed knowledge above opinion, and that was some kind of a debate between sophists and Socrates. Also, Aristotle is more of a realist.
Reka, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because like I say, I'm supposed to do a workshop,
Right.
so I'm supposed to show some of the techniques that I'm using in the practice. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have to be careful because sometimes people, when you interrupt them,
No. I'm very clear. Thank you so much. And
okay. But wait, let me just do something here, because see, for me, what's really important is to follow. So we are together, yeah. And you see, I was listening to you. I got what I call a sort of panorama, but at some point, I don't know what you're doing. You see, I don't know. So maybe it's clear, maybe it's my problem. I don't know what you're doing. Yeah? So that's why I say, Reka, I prefer you stop, yeah? And then I'm going to make a little request on you, which is to qualify the nature of your intention, because Plato says that the unity of a speech is its intention, it's its substance. And I want to ask you what you want to say, first of all, to qualify. Is it that you see a problem? Is it an objection? Is it a question? Is it, can you just conceptualize the nature of your intervention? Can you do it?
Sure.
What do you call it? How do you call it? Just one word.
I'll call it the problem.
Okay, you see a problem. We good?
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. When I started to check, yeah, okay, so we're together. You know, often when Plato speaks, as I always say, yes, no, okay, very useful, okay? Now, okay, so you see a problem, we're good, yeah? Okay, so now, if you see a problem, are you okay that you can specify this problem just with one sentence, which of course will not cover everything, but the essence of the problem in one sentence? Can you do it?
Okay, I'll try.
Go
so
ahead.
The problem is that how can we justify philosophical counseling as being a representative of Socratic / Platonic kind of a knowledge when we are talking about practice and opinion forming. So, yeah.
Now, have you ever heard of Occam's razor or no?
I have.
Yeah. Okay. So let's use a bit here Occam's razor, and I'm going to ask you to do a little work to purify your question. So you really get rid of all what could be what Aristotle calls the accidental, to stick with the essential. And often, as a little challenge, as a little game, I say, try to make your question in 15 words maximum, just for the exercise. Really short, really sharp. Can you do it?
I'll try. Okay. So how do we place philosophical Socratic wisdom in the world of realism or of lived experience?
Okay. All right. Now that's a question, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you think, so now we're going to a bit deconstruct or analyze your question. Yeah. If you ask this question, it means that you see an obstacle somewhere, right? You agree? Yes? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can you again, in a very short way, specify what you view as an obstacle?
Okay. So obstacle is not having reference to evidence, the knowledge through evidence.
Okay, so you think because Socrates does not use the idea of evidence as a reference, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Right.
And for you, that's the problem, yeah?
Right.
Okay. Now, could this be viewed as something positive?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Okay.
Or no? Mm-hmm. Yes? Each time I check, I want you to tell me, yes, it's okay. No, it's not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Just thinking.
Okay, yeah, if you need time to say, let me think. That's okay
yeah.
as well. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want
I
to,
need. Yeah.
I don't want to stress you. Okay. So what could be the interest of not accept evidence as a reference? What could be the interest?
Oh, that is what my question was. I mean, I was
know.
a little perplexed about that.
Yeah.
That,
But you see, I know that that's your question. That's why, again, we're trying to formulate it and make it very sharp. But you see, the principle of the Socratic questioning is to invite the person who asks a question to trust that he has access to logos, he has access to reason, and he could produce a hypothesis. See, in other words, you take the question, you you're the echo of the question, and you invite the person to say, look, can you try to give a hypothesis, some kind of answer to your question? See, so I know, so don't worry, I'm conscious that's your question. So I'm asking you again, how do you think it could be interesting, or why, that evidence is not a reference anymore? What could be the interest? Can you give a hypothesis for that?
Probably it could be that if evidence becomes a reference, it can always be monetized, commercialized, or divert from the mainstream, divert from the main logos or the abstract kind of logos. Yeah.
Okay, so you oppose logos to commercial activity. Is that it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, in other words, what you're saying is that we give up this reference to evidence, then we go back to some logos which is disconnected from selling something, right?
Right.
Well, does that look to you like a healthy principle? Or no? Just what your conclusion. Do you think it can be a healthy principle, or no, you don't like it for some reason?
I won't agree with it.
You what?
I will not agree with it.
Okay, so you don't think going back to the logos and giving up the commercial activity, you don't think that's a good idea, right?
No. For me, going back to logos is preferable over monetizing. Right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yes, you had surprised me a bit, but that's because I misunderstood. Okay. Well, do you see then that you have the answer to your question, that if we give up the evidence as a reference, we go back to the logos, which is disconnected from selling anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But then you're a happy woman. Or no?
But, that answers part of my question. I mean, but that doesn't still solve my problem.
Okay, but wait, at least that problem is solved, because you see, maybe when we quote unquote solve a problem, we might discover another one. But still, we should not deny that at least the first problem was dealt with, you see? Right. So your initial question, well, you sort of provided an answer for it. Do you agree? Yes?
I do.
Okay. Otherwise, we're going to put everything together. It's going to create confusion. So we'll go step by step. The first step you propose, yes, the interest is we go back to the logos and don't get stuck in some commercial operation. Okay? Right. That's the first hypothesis. And that, in a way, answers the question. We're good?
Right.
Okay. But then you have a new question, a new problem. Is that it?
No. Coming as a residue of the previous problem.
So, no, but I mean, see, if you give a hypothesis to answer your question and you want to give a but, that means you saw a new problem. So, are you like fully satisfied with your initial answer, or there's still something bothering you, which means there's.
If I can interrupt, it is. I have always, if I can just elaborate a bit, that for me, staying with logos is more important than monetizing it or commercializing it. That is for me a given.
Okay. But then, but therefore,
Yeah.
you should be satisfied with your answer.
Yeah.
But why are you not satisfied?
That part is agreeable. My only issue is that how do we then extend it to the world of life and living for everyone?
All right. So now, new problem. How do we extend the logos to life, everyday life and living? Yeah.
Right.
Because
Right.
that implies that you see some kind of disconnection between logos and life and living. Yeah.
In a way, yeah. I do.
Okay, fine. And now you want to reestablish a connection, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, I suppose you're a living person, yeah?
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, you seem to be connected to the conception of logos intellectually. You agree?
I do.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you in a simple way, how do you, as a subject, connect logos to your daily life? Do you have a connection in your life or no connection?
I do have a connection.
Give us the connection and as concise as possible. What's the connection?
The connection is acting reasonably.
Sorry, repeat.
Acting reasonably.
You think reasonably. Well,
Yeah.
that is like a very nice answer. You connect the logos to your daily life by thinking reasonably, by being a rational woman. Is that it?
Right.
Well, we got the answer to your second question. Do you agree?
And yeah.
Good. Are you satisfied? You still have a problem?
No, I'm satisfied.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Okay, but before you abandon me,
No,
let
I'm
me-
not.
well, it's a metaphor. Did you like our? Did you enjoy our dialogue or no?
I did. And
Tell me why. Tell me why.
because I started with a doubt, which has got clarified, and yet some sort of, what should I say, not anxiety, but some sort of questioning and curiosity still remains. And that is the purpose of Socratic dialogue.
Did you notice something about the methodology or the technique by which we dealt with your question? Did you observe anything about it?
There was, first of all, trying to problematize and then put it through an argumentation. That is how I look at it.
Okay, and you think that's useful?
I found it useful.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So I have finished a little dialogue with Reka here. Before we move on to some other issue, first I would like to see if somebody has either a comment or a question about that particular dialogue. Later on, we'll move to other issues you might have. But first of all, does anybody want to say something or ask something about this dialogue? You raise your hand if that's the case. Okay, I see no one.
Yes, we have Professor Raja, sir.
Oh, Professor Raja, go ahead then.
Yes, thank you. I also have my hand up for something else, but I wanted
that's
to.
why I got confused.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So I wanted to, at some point in this exchange, I think I would have wanted to say something else or make a different kind of move or suggestion, and I just wanted to add that to the mix. And that was at the point where the question was raised, why one would eschew evidence as a reference, right? Why would evidence as a reference not be important? Why might that not be as important to Socrates as one might otherwise think? At that point, I think I would have intervened or responded differently, and that I just wanted to try out. And I think my response would have been that it's not clear to me that evidence is objective and the same for everyone.
Right. Okay. But you see, here you're saying you would have answered something else than Reka, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, here I have to tell you something. First of all, I was surprised by the Reka answer. I did not expect it, that at that point, the commercial aspect would come up, yeah? And every time I do a consultation with someone, I often, sometimes it's more expectable, sometimes you're surprised, but I can never like project, I can have ideas in my mind, but I should never project what I would answer. You know, the idea I have to be totally available to what the person is answering and work with that answer. Because otherwise, let's call it the danger or the trap would be that I would try to tell her what would be a better answer, but then I am not working with her anymore. I'm just working with my own theories about the issue, yeah? And of course, if you would have answered what you proposed instead of her answer, yeah, my next questions, of course, would have been much different. I would have to accompany your hypothesis, yeah?
And
But
let me just say that I'm not saying this is a better answer. I'm just saying I just wanted to note that this is what I would have said at this point.
yeah. No, it's not a matter of better or worse. Of course, sometimes I can find a hypothesis more interesting than another one, of course. But the idea is that you're focused. The center of thinking is the other person, yeah? So, and my questions is only geared at one thing. First of all, make the person conscious of her own speech, you know, by clarifying it. And second, how to go deeper in that speech and problematize it, yeah? But whatever comes, you know, I use a lot, there's a Chinese philosopher I use a lot. For me, he's a bit of a Socratic Chinese Socrates. I don't know if he's well known in India. He's 3 centuries before Christ. He's called Chuang-Tzu. He's a Taoist philosopher. He has, I mean, the method a bit different, but there's many aspects is quite similar. Actually, people interested I have a book on him I wrote on my website about Chuang-Tzu. But he calls it availability, yeah, to be available. And when you question someone, you got to be available. You cannot go and have, what should be the answer, yeah? And sometimes you do get weird stuff, you get surprising stuff, but that's what's interesting, yeah? So of course, if you would have given that answer, I would have gone with your answer since that's what you give. Is that clear on the method? Yeah? Okay, good. Okay, so I see Deepa wants to speak.
Just to clarify, Deepa, do you have a question or you want to also have an interactive session right now?
No, actually, my question got answered. I was wanting a little bit more about the method, what exactly, a deconstruction of the method. Yeah.
Okay. Then so you want to ask or it's dealt with?
I think broadly you have mentioned that it's being available, and I thought you also echoed the question back. If there's anything more you would like to in terms of deconstructing what you did with Rekha, I'd be happy to know.
Well, if I can summarize what I remember I did, first thing was the interruption. Yeah, interruption. Why? Because at some point, I don't know what's going on. You know, there are too many things. So I interrupt. Yeah, first interrupt. And there I have to be careful. Some people get upset about that. To ask her, okay, what is it you want to say? And then we do what Plato calls purification. We're going to try to really go at the essence of what she wants to say. It's a problem, it's a question, right? That was the first thing. The second thing, then she asked, but it was still a bit broad. So I said, can you really synthesize to the maximum the question? Yeah, she finally did. And once she had done that, I said, well, then which hypothesis you want to give, which answer you want to give to your own question. And she did give an answer to her own question, but you can see in her mind, she was still troubled. Yeah. So I said, well, let's separate. You answered your first question. So fine, you should be happy with it, satisfied. It's an answer. And then if there's a new problem, we'll deal with it, but as a separate issue, so we don't confuse everything. And then she asked a second question. And then I asked her to answer this question, and she answered the question. Okay. That's my analysis of basically the dialogue that we had. Is that clear?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And what I did with her are typical, I would say, standard procedures. Yes. You know, interruption, synthesizing, and proposing a hypothesis to answer the question. And when there's a second thing, to separate it, make it as a separate issue. Good?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Madhulika, why don't you tell me who to speak to, because I don't always follow.
Yeah, no problem, sir. Pravajja, do you have a question here? Because Raja sir wants to have a discussion. He has a query. But if you have any questions for the for Rekha Navneet ma'am discussion, then please raise your hand. Else, Professor Raja would be having us. I think he has a question right now. A new question.
But I see, sorry, Madhu, I see two people with little virtual hand that didn't speak.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm asking if they have a question regarding the last interactive session, or do they have a new query? If yes, then Pravajja, please unmute.
I do have a question regarding the last interaction that happened with it.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask that Oscar sir had mentioned right now that there are some hypotheses, with clients that he finds more interesting than others, and then there might also be some situations where the hypothesis is, very different or sometimes even opposing to the views that he might hold personally. So as a philosophical practitioner, how do you sort of disconnect or alienate your own views while, engaging with a client? And so earlier in the conference, I think he had mentioned something about disconnection and, alienation on the part of the client who has come for a counseling. So does that also apply to the practitioner as well?
Okay. Madhulika, do you understand well when Pravajja is speaking or no?
It was clear, but yeah, there was some still disturbance. Pravajja, can you
Okay.
speak again, maybe?
Okay, no, let's do this, because I could not, I don't know if it's a sound or sometime I'm not used to Indian people speaking English. Sometimes it's hard for me, just like when I hear Australians, it's a bit difficult because I'm not used to the way they speak English. It's a problem with English from different places. So Pravajja, let's do again the same thing. Can you make in a very concise way the question you're asking, and this way we make sure we hear it, and if I don't understand, Madhulika will help me, but make it very concise, please.
Sure. Sir, so does the concept of alienation or
Pravajja, you're still your voice is it's very low. I think you should keep your mic near to your mouth.
Is it better now?
Yeah. So is it better? Are you able to hear her well?
I find it better, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just talk maybe a little bit slowly and give space, because because of the accent, it is a bit problem.
Sir, does the concept of disconnect or alienation, which you had earlier talked about on the part of the client who has come for philosophical counseling, apply on the practitioner as well? Because you had mentioned that there are some hypotheses that you find more interesting than others, and there might also be some that are quite opposed to the views that you hold. So how do you lead the client in such situations? Like, what is the process then?
Okay, Pravajja, you see, I know I'm a bit bothersome when I ask to do that, but for me, it's a very nice exercise to synthesize the maximum. And sometimes I like to tell people, you want to make a good question, it should not be more than 15 words. See, we sort of see a bit the context we see, but try, it's a nice exercise, a bit formal, but try to make a question that has no more than 15 words. You think you can take that challenge?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, I can definitely try. Sir, how does a philosophical practitioner lead a client whose views he might find different or opposing to his own?
Okay. Madhulika, did you hear the question clearly?
No, I couldn't
No?
hear the middle part.
Uh,
Pravaja, I think.
Bala, did you hear the question clearly? No?
No.
No? Okay. Well, let me tell, I think I understood is what I do with the client when some ideas come up, which for him are a problem or troubling. Is that it, Pravaja?
No, sir. Sir, my question is that how do you deal with a client or lead a client whose views or hypotheses are quite different or opposing to your own? The views that you
Okay.
might.
That's it. I got it. I got it. Yeah. When it's supposed to be. Well, okay. Here, let me give you a bit of concept. You see how I define the relationship between the philosopher and his client. His client is a subject. And as a subject, he has a thinking, a worldview, opinions, feelings, emotion, whatever, what the normal subject does. But the challenge for the philosopher is to be a non-subject, You have no feelings, no thought, no opinions, you see? So if a person thinks like you, it doesn't matter. If he doesn't think like you, it doesn't matter. You don't care. It's a non-issue. And that's difficult when we train people to do philosophical practice. That's one of the biggest difficulty. You have to get rid of yourself in a way and be only interested in the thinking process. So if somebody comes up with a weird idea, when you deal with the weird idea, something in the back of your head must say, oh, it's a little bit weird. But first of all, you do a bit of theater, you pretend everything is fine. And second, you work with it because it might make no sense at the beginning. Maybe you find it makes sense, whatever, right? So you have to be liberated of yourself in a way. You have to be free of yourself. That's what I call being a non-subject. If you are bothered by what people are saying, well, then you're doing something else. You want to teach them some wisdom. And that's the difference I see between teaching wisdom. I'm going to tell you how to be wise, what's to be wise, and philosophical practice. In philosophical practice, there's no a priori good, right idea. The only thing there is using reason. I mean, is it coherent? Is it clear? Yeah, that's the only criteria. But never to say I would. Otherwise, a lot of people, the way they speak, I don't think like them. But it's a non-issue. And in fact, there's two traps. The trap of people that don't think like you, and you will show it in the way you speak, and the trap of people that think like you, and therefore you will not problematize. You will be complacent with those people because they think like you, yeah? These are the two traps. So you have to neither agree nor disagree. You have to be a non-subject. Does that answer your question, Pravaya?
Yes, sir. It definitely does. Thank you very much. Also, I wanted to ask you another thing, if possible.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Earlier in the conference, you had mentioned something about disconnecting the subject. The client has to disconnect or somewhat alienate with himself. So does that apply to the philosophical practitioner as well? Because you said has to be a non-subject. How does one do that?
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, when you're supposed to be a non-subject, and you invite as well the other person to desubject